Welcome to the first chapter overview of international health. My name is Mike Stutes. I'll be one of your guides through this course. Before we get started on the chapter, one of the things I wanted to point out, and it's something someone told me when I first started teaching, was how to read textbooks. And I'm going to recommend this to you guys, that you scroll through the book, the chapters, reading the learning objectives, and you just go through and read the titles, read captions on figures and tables, study graphs, maps, and things like this. Read all the tables in detail, and just keep going through these and coming up with sort of the idea of what the chapter's talking about. And you do this all the way through the chapter. And then when you get toward the end, you'll find a summary like this. And what that does, in your mind, it shows you where the chapter starts, the main topics, and where it ends. Now that's how we store information. So by doing this, it gives us a great place to file the information. So I would suggest you do that on all the books and all your textbooks. Now what we're going to do on these videos is go through each chapter, and I'm just going to highlight some of the key concepts that you want to pay attention to. And I recommend that you highlight your textbook, read the chapter, read the highlights, go back and read for greater detail and understanding. So, each chapter has vignettes that we're going to pay attention to, and each chapter starts off with the learning objectives. Start off by reading the learning objectives and thinking about those as questions. Can you do these things? Come back to them at the end of your study of this module and chapter, and you should be able to answer those questions. Okay? Each chapter has the vignettes that talks about the different health issues from around the world. One of the things we want to be cautious about in this class is the different topics come up. Always remember that in this course we're talking about an international setting. A lot of times it's easy to come back home in your thinking and what's happening here with the Affordable Care Act and so on, but remember, we're always talking about international settings. Okay? So in this text, starting off, we're talking about why study international health. There's a couple of points in this. I'm going to highlight some things for you here. Excuse me. Something you'll hear quite often in global international health is that how the world is shrinking. We're basically one plane ride away from anywhere in the world, and how that greatly affects health. Okay? I'm going to flip through here as we go. How health varies around the world. If you look at this one statement, in Japan the life expectancy is 83 years old and is 61 years in Haiti. It's just by being born appearing on the earth in a different place, and there's 20 years or so difference in your life expectancy. So pay attention to that, and we'll talk more about that later on in the text. Another reason that global health is becoming such a relevant topic is because there's no way to solve this individually. It's going to take different actors, different governments, different entities from around the world to deal with these issues. And there's some mention here, everything from Doctors Without Borders to the U2 frontman to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And there's mention here the Millennium Development Goals, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now we need to define things, and here's the World Health Organization's definition of health, and as it's stated, that's the definition used in this textbook. One of my favorite definitions, public health, comes from 1923. and the science and the art. So make sure you pay attention to that. That really does sum up what we're trying to do for public health, and it really is very relevant to what we're talking about in this class in international health. Global health is always different definitions and so on, so under global health, pay attention to that and the different definitions, and you have to think about how something is defined may have great bearing on whether it gets certain fundings and so on, so that's why so much emphasis is placed on how we define global health. Now, critical concepts we have here, and this is these are sort of chapters, if you will: determinants of health, how we measure health, culture, all the way through organization and function of health systems. So these concepts are all reviewed in detail throughout the class. And the same thing happens, and we're on page 8. And these concepts go to environmental health, nutrition. These are more micro issues as opposed to the other ones. Maybe more, you can think of those as more macro. Now, different texts view regions a little differently. You're probably familiar with developed countries and developing countries. So we have those, and you need to be aware of those terms. But this text goes a little further and uses the World Bank division, dividing them into 4 income groups. Now, when you look at these, you'll maybe be surprised that we've got 995 or less income, and then at the highest one, we're $12,196 or above. Now, remember, that's globally. Now, in the U.S., you think $12,000 and above, those are certainly not, that's certainly not one tax bracket. But around the world, we have these 4 divisions. And the World Bank also does some geography, and that's viewed here in these bullets that go over to page 9, and they separate the world in those geographic distinctions. Now, this book will make continuous reference to the Millennium Development Goals. So you really need to be aware of these. You can find these on the next page. And spend a lot of time with this. I'm not going to say to memorize this, but you certainly should be familiar with it. Each goal has huge bearings on global health, so you need to be aware of the goals and possibly a general idea of the targets. We come over here in the closing of chapter 1 with the case studies. So read over the case studies, and you'll see 2 or 3 examples of what happened with smallpox, both the good and the bad, the challenges. And we talk a little about cost versus benefits. And then the chapter closes with central messages from the book. And again, that's the summary that you want to spend some time with. Start here, or when you skim the book for the first time, or skim the chapter for the book, read these, and you can come back to these at the end. And when you read them after reading the chapter, they should mean a lot more to you. Okay? So that is the end of the chapter overview. I hope you enjoy this chapter, and take your time, go through it, highlight any questions. You could send those in. Thank you very much.